Hello? Can you hear me? Well?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Thank you very much. Dr. Montaz, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Oh, very good, because we cannot see you yet.
Yeah.
Thank you. So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We will be talking about the latest developments from regional competition regimes across the world. I am Teresa Moreira. I am the head of the Competition and Consumer Policies branch of UNCTAD, which most of you probably don't know. UNCTAD is the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development, which integrates the United Nations Secretariat. But the reason why there is a Competition and Consumer Policies branch as UNCTAD is that UNCTAD is the guardian of the only internationally agreed instrument in the field of competition, which is, well, simply, shortly called the United Nations Set of Principles and Rules on Competition, which was approved by the United Nations General Assembly in December 1980, recognizing the contribution of competition law and policy for economic development, and thereby recognizing also the legitimacy of developing countries in adopting and implementing competition law and policy according to their specific features. At the same time, it establishes a framework for international cooperation, and of course, UNCTAD is at the core of all of this through its 3 pillars of work. So, of course, consensus building, something that won't surprise you since we are within the United Nations. So we convene annual intergovernmental group of experts meetings to provide for exchanges of information and knowledge, consultations, and deliberations. We prepare these meetings supported by our research and analysis. And finally, our third pillar of work is technical cooperation. So our focus as an organization is to assist developing countries to better integrate the world economy, to put it broadly and in a very ambitious manner. And we do provide the largest platform in all areas under our mandate because we have 195 members. So I would say that we are considerably global. I would like to just spend a couple of more minutes to explain to you why we are talking about this specific topic. So, we as UNCTAD have been privileged to assist a number of regional economic organizations composed by developing countries, which interestingly elected competition law and policy as an issue to be dealt at regional level, even if in some cases some member states of these regional economic organizations have yet to adopt competition law and to set up an institution to enforce this law. So we started, I believe, working with a number of organizations in the African continent. And there are a lot of regional economic organizations in Africa that have competences at regional level on competition law and policy. We have one of their representatives from the Common Market of Eastern and Southern Africa, Dr. Willard Mwemba, here. He heads the Competition Authority of COMESA. Then, of course, this is also the case in Latin America, although not so expressively, probably, but we have recently been supporting the Central American Network for Competition Law and Policy. That is the case also of Asia. Of course, we have always been working with the ASEAN Secretariat that some of you will be familiar with, and also with CIS countries, so the former republics of the former Soviet Union, now independent countries, because several of them are members of the Eurasian Economic Commission, which also has competences at regional level. We think this is a very interesting development because regional cooperation can really contribute to international cooperation. And of course, from a very practical point of view, I would like to say that the benefits are clearly filling the gap of national competition frameworks, as I said, that in some cases are missing, reducing resource constraints and providing for the pooling of knowledge, of information, and of course of means, capacity building, and finally, from an enforcement point of view, effective enforcement against cross-border cases. It won't be a surprise to you that several, if not all of these organizations, especially those who are enforcing competition law at regional level, were inspired by the example of the European competition law and more recently of the European competition network achievements, because of course these regional economic organizations are focusing on promoting regional integration and in several cases, as we have heard, even to achieve a common market. So we have also observed that cooperation, especially between competition authorities that are not experienced, is more easily initiated at regional level because the member states tend to have similar backgrounds, very similar legal frameworks, they share common interests and mutual areas of benefit, and of course they are usually more open to understand each other's needs and challenges, which in a way are all prerequisites for effective cooperation. We ourselves, with our technical cooperation projects, have really adopted a regional focus. We started almost 20 years ago with a project for Latin American countries, initially focused on 5 countries. And the third edition of this project ended in 2018 with all 17 countries, practically all countries in Latin America, even Guatemala, which at that time has not yet a competition law, was an active participant, and only excluding countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and I believe Belize. We also had interesting regional cooperation with the Middle East and North African countries, both combining competition and consumer protection. We have, with the Bulgarian Competition Commission, developed cooperation under the Sofia Competition Forum for Eastern Europe and the Balkans. We have, with the OECD and the United Nations Commission for the Arab countries, ESCOA, developed the Arab Competition Forum for the Arab countries. We are a part with the Turkish Competition Authority of the Istanbul Competition Forum that aims to the Balkans and South Caucasus. And we have also a project with the Portuguese-speaking developing countries in Africa and Asia Pacific, that is to say, East Timor. So these are my words of introduction. I would now like to start formally introducing my speakers. The first one, as I said, is Dr. Willard Mwemba. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa Competition Commission. Dr. Mwemba has over 18 years of experience in competition and consumer law enforcement, with wide experience in enforcing the CAMESA competition regulations and the development of competition and consumer protection laws, guidelines, and operational manuals. He serves as a member of the United Nations, that is to say, UNCTAD's Training Center for Middle East and Africa Advisory Board, and he has written extensively and is a guest lecturer on the subject of competition and consumer law at various universities in Africa and beyond. He holds a number of qualifications, among which a bachelor's degree with specialization in law and economics from the University of Zambia, a master's degree in European Union competition law from King's College London, and a PhD in competition law from the University of Cape Town. My second speaker online, who could not make it, unfortunately, is Dr. Mahmoud Montaz. He is currently the chairman of the Egyptian Competition Authority since January 2021. He serves as a commissioner at the CAMESA Competition Commission. He is the chairman of the Committee of Initial Determination at the CAMESA Competition Commission. Is a board member at the Gas Regulatory Authority, the Supreme Council for Media Regulation, the Egyptian Electric Utility and Consumer Protection Regulatory Agency, as well as a member at the Advisory Committee of Anti-Dumping, Subsidy and Safeguards. Previous to his chairmanship, he served as private sector development specialist at the World Bank's headquarters in Washington, D.C., where he was mainly responsible for several competition policy projects as well as private sector developments in the MENA region and Southeast Asia. In addition, he has actively participated in the reformulation of competition law and enforcement regimes in a number of Middle Eastern countries and conducted trainings to numerous stakeholders. He's a member of the board of the Faculty of Law at the British University in Egypt and a lecturer on competition law and economics. He holds a PhD in competition law and economics from the University of Hamburg, Germany. Finally, last but not least, Dr. Martina Noirja, who is the head of the International Cooperation Office of the Polish Competition and Consumer Protection Authority, and this office has the aim of facilitating dissemination of knowledge, best practices, and expertise between the authority and international experts, as well as developing cooperation in order to support stronger competition enforcement and policy. She worked previously as a consultant on a wide range of public policies in the field of socio-economic developments and competitiveness, including state aid, and she has excellent knowledge of different stakeholders and their needs, as well as wider perspective on competition and consumer protection issues. She has written and contributed to a number of documents and publications aiming at communicating more effectively with public authorities. She holds a PhD in philosophy, political, legal, and economic philosophy. So, after this rather long introduction, I would like to tell you that we will have 2 rounds of questions to the 3 speakers. The first one will allow them more or less 5 minutes, and I would like to ask Willard to please provide us an overview of COMESA and its work in the field of competition, because I'm assuming that our audience is not necessarily familiar with this. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Yes, I think I am. Thank you very much, Teresa, and thank you for facilitating and organizing this. Thank you for also welcoming me to this beautiful historic town of Rome. It is my first time. Every time the Italians are speaking, I get mesmerized with their language. It's so poetic, so musical. I've watched them in movies a lot of times, so listening to them directly is a pleasure of my life. Thank you so much. Now, COMESA, what does it stand for? It simply stands for the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. It has 21 member states from different regions of Africa. Obviously, as the name speaks for itself, it includes countries from Southern Africa. It also includes countries from Eastern Africa. But something that is not in the name, it also includes 5 countries from the northern part of Africa, and also the Indian Ocean islands like Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, Comoros, and a number of them. So 21 countries in total. COMESA was initially established as a preferential trade area in 1981. And pardon me, I don't have slides because I intended this not to be so formal. I intended it to be an interaction and a bit informal. We are all free. So sometimes I think PowerPoints make it so so mechanical and so formal. So COMESA was established in 1981 as the preferential trade area, basically by frontline states, a few of them, about 5, from the southern and eastern part of Africa, where they would give preferential conditions of trade amongst themselves. But by 1994, the vision had changed. There was a vision of establishing a common market premised on the principles of the community law in Europe, or the European Commission. So a treaty was adopted, a treaty establishing the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa in 1994. And the objectives of that treaty was that the member states, 19 at the time, had the objective of achieving sustainable growth and development for all the member states, ensuring that there is stability, political stability in those member states, but also trying to push an agenda of attracting investments into this common region or the common market as was envisaged. So foreign direct investment, cross-border investments among the countries there, and indeed local investments. But then the founding fathers of COMESA, who were transitioning from the PTA to COMESA in 1994, were very mindful that these objectives and policies indeed to enhance trade would be irrelevant if anti-competitive practices were allowed to prevail in this new common market. So they then agreed that any kind of policies, any kind of practices, and I emphasize on the term policy as well, because it was also government policies and laws that would also negate competition. So any kind of policies, any kind of practices that negate the objectives of free and liberalized trade was agreed that should be prohibited. And then obviously the Magna Carta of competition law was enacted, where they did state that any category of agreements, decisions, or concerted practices which have as their object or effect the prevention, restriction, or distortion of competition in that common market or any significant part of it should be prohibited. And then later on, to ensure that they achieve that, they did in the treaty provide for a provision to come up with the COMESA competition regulations. So the COMESA competition regulations were promulgated pursuant to Article 55.3 of that treaty. And I'm glad today we were also talking about consumer issues with John Vickers. The COMESA competition regulations, that name is also misleading. So many misleading things about COMESA, right? First of all, common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, but we have North African countries. Competition, COMESA competition regulations, something misleading about that as well, in that it does not only contain provisions of law on competition matters, but provisions of law on consumer matters. So the purpose and objective of those regulations, in summary, and just to conclude on my opening remarks, is to promote and encourage competition by preventing restrictive business practices that deter the efficient operations of markets, and then also to make sure that consumers are protected from offensive conduct by market actors. As we heard, competition sometimes may be a means but not an end to itself, so there's deliberate need to have consumer protection provision, and I think the founding fathers of COMESA were very mindful of that. And as I conclude, Teresa, why then should I be talking to you about COMESA today in Italy, in Rome, at this LIA competition festival? It's very important for us here to understand the existence of this COMESA, in that, number one, at least for Africa, it is the most advanced and fully operational competition and consumer authority. Number two, it is very independent and objective, as you will hear later in my interventions, that our decisions follow a due process, and there are provisions for us to be challenged of our decisions. I'll give examples. And then lastly, your clients, you who are lawyers in Europe, your clients have been involved in a number of cases with us, whether mergers or conduct cases. So it's very important. There's lots of opportunity there. As I said, it's the most fully functional regional competition authority in Africa. It's very important that you know about it, you understand its operations, and guide your clients, some of whom are European companies that we deal with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Willard. Mahmoud, over to you. I would like to also please introduce a regional cooperation experience that you are involved in, I would say also leading, namely the Arab Competition Network, and maybe you can also make a comment to our common Arab Competition Forum. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Unfortunately, I was not been able to be with you today, but I was wishing to be in Rome. As Willard has mentioned, it's a lovely city that everyone would like to visit. So let me go to the question. And as you may know, Egypt is located as Arab, African, Mediterranean kind of a country. So you need to cooperate with a lot of people in your region. So I will focus, as the question was posed to me, on the Arab side now. So Egypt, with all the members of the Arab League, State of Arab Leagues, actually formed in the Arab Competition Network, which is more or less similar to the idea of the ECN. Currently, we're working on three main working groups. One working group is focusing on enforcement, and the other one is focusing on capacity building and advocacy. And the third group is focusing on merger and acquisition. So on the academic front, currently the ACN have launched a program for students, which is called the Competition Authority Simulation for the Arab region, which basically grabs students from economic, legal backgrounds, put them together to have a more understanding of competition law, and then go through a simulation of a hypothetical competition case. This, for us, enhances the knowledge and the know-how of competition, which makes two things for us: enhancing what we call the competition culture in our markets, either in private sector or public sector. Second is, from an enforcement standpoint, of course, all the Arab region have different levels of understanding of competition law, and hence we try to enhance the working together between case handlers on capacity building training. And here, as Teresa have mentioned, falls perfectly the initiative of the UNCTAD, ESCWA, and OECD, which is the Arab Competition Forum, which also enhances and helps in the enhancement of the capacity building and of the knowledge transfer between Arab states. In terms of more enforcement and working together, currently we're working on different topics and items. So currently we're working on joint guidelines in different fields, and also joint papers and conferences to make it easier for anybody doing business in the Arab world to understand the dimensions and the sphere of competition in different markets and in different jurisdictions. So this, in our minds, would help two things: would help us in enforcing better our competition laws, but also at the same time would help businesses doing business in the Arab world to easily have an idea of how to work with compliance to our laws and regulations in the region. So I'll stop here, and I know there's another question that will be coming back, but thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud. Now I turn to Martina. I would like very much to ask you to share with us the goals and the developments that have already been achieved under this recent memoranda signed by the Nordic, Baltic, and Eastern European countries, where I was privileged to witness. I think even the European colleagues are not necessarily aware of that, so please, over to you to share this experience.
Thank you very much. And Teresa, thanks very much for organizing this panel. Because first of all, I think that any kind of panels where we discuss international cooperation and the tangible benefits of it is super useful, because somehow intuitively we all understand that international cooperation is good, but sometimes you don't really try to understand what are the tangible benefits of it. And as the director of international cooperation at the Polish authority, I really try to make sure that what we do is not burdening anybody with additional work, but is really contributing to better enforcement. So that's something I really like to think about and reflect on. It's really great to hear all those initiatives, and there are different kinds of international cooperation. There is multilateral cooperation, bilateral cooperation, more or less binding. As we've heard, both COMESA and the Arab Competition Network, they are ECN-like in a way, but very different from it, tailored to the regional needs. And this is great because we pick up always in the regions what we need most, and that really relates a lot, Teresa, to what you've said about the benefits of regional cooperation and how it is formed. So we have a similar experience, because in Europe, we are part of the ECN network, the European Competition Network, which has a very coordinated and very harmonized competition structure entrenched in the EU treaty. We have had a different kind of experience and initiative, which was a very bottom-up initiative. The memorandum that Teresa mentioned, it's a memorandum of 10 competition authorities, which was signed in April of this year, and it involves 8 European authorities from the Baltic states: the Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian, the Polish, the Czech, Slovak, Hungarian, and Romanian, and 2 non-European ones, and in fact the 2 newest EU members, Ukraine and Moldova. And it was a very bottom-up initiative for us, because it started really with the geopolitical issues that arose last year, and we've had the urge to support our neighbors in Ukraine and in Moldova. We've had lots of calls from our colleagues in Europe and beyond also, to see how we could come together and support them. So we started organizing a series of very multilateral workshops for I say they are very multilateral because they are multilateral on both sides, on the beneficiary side and on the expert side. On the beneficiary side, we had workshops for Ukrainian, Moldovan, and Georgian competition experts, and they were provided not only by the Polish competition colleagues, but also from colleagues from many other countries, from the US, from Spain, from Hungary, from France, Lithuania, Czech Republic, Portugal even was among them, and also from other organizations, UNCTAD among them, the European Commission and OECD. And they were very successful. We've seen that having that strong expertise on board really provided us with a much broader perspective. So we've decided this has actually naturally evolved into a more formalized memorandum of understanding that we've signed with those 10 countries. And it was for us very important that even though it's a regional initiative, signed by the 10 countries, it's not exclusive, and in fact it's inclusive, which is why we've had Teresa at the ceremony of signing of the memorandum, and also representatives of the OECD and European Commission to make sure that we can really send that signal. And just very briefly on the rationale and the reasons why this regional cooperation came to happen, beyond the urge to support, was that we have all geographical closeness with one another. We have a history cooperating with one another and cooperating with the non-EU members that we have on board, and also we share the cooperation on the basis of EU rules. Also for the countries like Moldova and Ukraine, who are on the road to the EU. And we do have shared needs in many different topics, in discussing those topics. And that platform has provided us with a very intimate environment of discussing things together that we cannot have in other very big initiatives like conferences or even the ECN, which features 27 countries. And it's not always targeted to our particular needs at a particular time. So that was a different kind of initiative with a different kind of purpose and complementary to everything else that exists.
Thank you. Very interesting, as you see. So regional cooperation flourishing, I should say, in different forms, sometimes with the same members, sometimes more formal than in other cases. I suppose that is the source of the richness, at least from my point of view. But now I would like to get to the nitty-gritty, so to speak, and I would like to ask Willard to tell us a little bit about recent interesting achievements in the field of merger control that I'm sure that our practitioners in the audience would appreciate. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. So just to give some context, COMESA Competition Commission was not born in 1994. What was born in 1994 was COMESA's regional economic community. The COMESA Competition Commission was born in 2013. So we are about 10 years old now. We recently commemorated our 10th anniversary in May this year. So we've been active in major regulations from 2013 to date. Now, I want to be broad enough here, Teresa, to state that I'm trying to talk about achievements, to state that in the 10-year journey when we began our merger enforcement, we were criticized sometimes for the decisions that we made. The first thing was that our decisions were, we would do a very detailed analysis, but would not share with the public or stakeholders the reasoning of our decisions. So we'd put a very small, short paragraph where I would simply say that the merger has been approved conditionally or unconditionally. And then there were a number of measures. I remember in 2015, a measure involving Bayer and Monsanto. It was a global merger, which measure we looked at as well at COMESA. And that measure was approved unconditionally at COMESA. And of course, I think it was approved actually at global level. There were quite a number of critics that thought COMESA should have prohibited that measure. We had a different view then, in that we did not see any significant competition concerns. But as I'm saying, we've been evolving, so maybe those criticisms are worth looking at now that we have evolved. And why have I given the example of Bayer and Monsanto? So as I said, when we began in 2013, most of our decisions, most of our assessment led to the conclusion that there were no competition issues, and hence the transaction is approved unconditionally. Then we graduated, probably we became, remember, we had no, Teresa, we had no proper reference. The only reference was to the European Commission, which is the conditions and the scenarios are quite different in Europe to Africa. So even the European Commission did not really, apart from principles, did not really provide the best learning curve that we needed. So we started graduating, becoming a little bit more competent, if I may use this term, that later on we started identifying competition concerns in those transactions, started approving them with behavioral conditions, which you will know that are not very easy to, are not the easiest to monitor. And then later on, we became more courageous, we became more competent, we became fully confident of ourselves, that we started approving transactions, major transactions, subject to divestiture conditions. One of the transactions where we did that was the Heineken Distel merger not long ago, and then AkzoNobel merger and Kansai Plascon. AkzoNobel obviously is involved in paints, and Kansai Plascon also involved in paints. These were the two closest competitors in most COMESA member states in paint manufacturing, especially the premium brand. So we did reject that transaction, and that signaled the graduation of COMESA from simply an authority where transactions are notified for rubber stamping of approvals to an authority that indeed identifies the competition concerns in these major transactions and addresses them. Those are some of the achievements. Now, I should be quick here so that I'm not misunderstood. It doesn't mean then that all those transactions that were approved unconditionally before or hitherto were wrong assessments. No. The ethos or the motto at COMESA Competition Commission is that we are not there to frustrate business. A competition authority should not be there to frustrate business. We are there to facilitate business and thereby contributing to the goals and objectives of the common market that is attracting investments. So usually when we have a merger that we think has competition concerns, the first thing that we do at COMESA is to sit down with the merging parties, with their lawyers, with their representatives, to discuss in what we call pre-merger conference calls or meetings, to discuss our concerns and how those can already be addressed even before the merger is subjected for determination. And that's one of the reasons why there's been very few transactions that were rejected before the Kansai AkzoNobel merger. And we think that is progressive. Mergers, basically, the parties don't merge with the objective of engaging in anti-competitive conduct. There are very few that do that. Most of them, the concerns come as a consequence of the structure of the market. So the best thing is to try to address those concerns as much as possible, and the rejection should be the last resort. From 2013 to date, we've dealt with over 370 mergers and acquisitions with a turnover of about $2.8 billion in the common market. And then what are the other achievements? I think the other achievements, Teresa, of COMESA in this field of merger control is the cooperation that we have established with our national competition authorities. So indeed, we are bound together with the national competition authorities by law, by the treaty, and indeed the COMESA competition regulations. But as I said when I started presenting here, I said I didn't want to have slides because I don't like these formalities. Sometimes they delay and put ice on progress. So even in terms of major regulations, despite having a treaty binding us, we thought it would be important to have cooperation MOUs with our member states. We have 21 member states and we have 16 cooperation MOUs with those. So it goes beyond the treaty obligations, but to if I may use these terms loosely, to interpersonal relations. Dr. Mahmoud here is a very good friend of mine. It is very easy for me when we have an issue to simply pick up a phone call and seek guidance from him or seek some information from him, rather than going through that whole process of the treaty in article blah, 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 states this, here is a letter, please. It wastes time sometimes. So that is one of the best things that we have done. And then we've gone beyond our member states to have cooperation agreements again with authorities and institutions outside COMESA. Some of them very formal MOUs, some of them informal cooperation arrangements. Teresa from UNCTAD, we may not have a formal MOU, but we've worked so much together to ensure that we develop competition laws in a number of African countries, but also beyond. Recently, we also signed an MOU with the United Nations Economic Commission for Western Asia, ESQA. ESQA basically for now is focused on making sure that they develop competition law enforcement in Arab-speaking countries. And we realized that both ESQA and COMESA had common member states, Arab countries like Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Somalia, Comoros, and those that I may have left out is not intentional. Sudan, yes, that's the problem of trying to list all of them. Sudan, and if you have left out any, it's not intentional. So we did realize that we have this common membership, and it would be important to pull resources together, expertise together, to ensure that competition law is enhanced in those regions. And again, I talked about informal MOUs. As we're doing this with ESQA, I had discussions with my brother here, Dr. Momtaz. Egypt being quite advanced, in fact, very advanced in competition law enforcement in that region. I had a chat with him on how we can use the Egyptian Competition Authority to indeed engage other Arab countries and expand competition law enforcement. I'm glad to speak today here that the first steps of that discussions have already been seen in that not so long ago, Teresa, I think about a week or 2 weeks ago, we were signing an MOU with the Libyan Competition Council under the auspices of the training center that you mentioned, which is hosted at the Egyptian Competition Authority. And we expect that Libya would also be on board. And just as I conclude, why are we trying to do all this? Usually when we sit in meetings, not just competition, the issue is we need to bring everybody on board, reduce poverty, and bring prosperity to everyone on earth. And competition law is one of those tools that can be used to achieve that. So this is why we have that focus and that desire, including the enforcement of major control rules in COMESA. And colleagues, you here in Europe, you can be part of that journey. We can be part of that journey. I know, Teresa, I don't know what happened, why I was ejected. There was this program for Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. And
because it's only in Portuguese, that's the only reason.
I once gave lectures there, but I was ejected. I don't know why. So that is the reason. And then we also want to reduce the cost of doing business, not just for COMESA businesses, not just for African businesses, but for European businesses as well, for businesses everywhere else in the world. In that at COMESA, we have what is the so-called one-stop shop. So once a major is notified at the COMESA Competition Commission, if it involves 2 or more countries, it will only be notified once. There will only be one notification fee paid. So the companies will not have to bother themselves with paying different notification fees in different countries. They will not be bothering themselves with understanding different notification regimes. There is no risk of having divergent and different outcomes by different competition authorities. So those are some of the achievements. We did a small study that time on what the benefits of the so-called one-stop shop in COMESA has brought in terms of doing business in that region. And the results were that we had contributed, at least just from a major control perspective, 66.67 or 66.7% reduction in the cost of doing business.
Excellent.
So those are some of the achievements. Teresa, I can go on and on and on.
I
like
know.
listening to myself, but maybe let me end here. Thank you so much.
We have serious time constraints, but thank you very much. I think this was, very vibrant as I expected. I will now go over again to Mahmoud, asking about some examples of cross-border anti-competitive cases that you would like to share within the context of the Arab competition framework.
Thank you so much. No, actually, let me start a little bit back on the fact that within the Arab Competition Network, we do have what's so-called the chat box, which basically make it easier for any case handlers within the Arab network, if they do have a question, how to analyze a matter, or how to see what other competition agencies within the Arab world have analyzed a similar market, could share their experience with them. So this enhances the overall expertise of the Arab competition agencies and enhance their capacity to enforce better their competition laws. In terms of bilateral cooperation, we already cooperated a lot with different Arab and non-Arab actually agencies. Of course, COMESA, as my dear friend and brother Dr. Mwamba have mentioned, is a really a key partner in different cases. So, for example, there is a lot that have been going on cases that has to do with Uber case, for example, merger case, and other digital market cases and non-digital in the sports area and so on. And this is where it really goes very well and very coherent to enforce better the competition. Also, to give you an example, the Uber merger case back in 2019, Uber was acquiring Careem, which is a major market player in this market of ride-hailing apps. We already cooperated with different countries. To give you an example, Saudi Arabia, COMESA, and so on. This cooperation not really to share confidential information about the merger itself, but actually to better understand markets and to better understand policies and to better understand how things could move in these markets that change, I would say, by the moment, and that's why this cooperation is very crucial to really learn how these markets work, because as you usually say, if we did a type 2 error, which is an under enforcement, that's okay. But if we did the type 1 error, which is over-enforcement, that's where the problem would happen. And as Will was mentioning, is basically we're there not to frustrate business. So that's the major thing. And I think this cooperation and this kind of talking to each other is enhancing this fact. So this is on the merger sides, but on the enforcement side, we also have a very interesting case, which is has to do with the food delivery apps, which has to do with a company, a Spanish company called Glovo. In 2019, we found out a cartel that existed where two companies, food delivery companies, agreed together to exit the Egyptian market, and especially that the agreement did not occur on Egyptian soil, but occurred in Europe. So, and this was a very interesting case where we really cooperated with different jurisdictions to really enhance the detection of such cases. And this is where it's very important, again, to cooperate on conduct cases in that regard. So to brief up, I think it's very important this cooperation to occur between member states of the Arab region and also between other member states of the African region. Recently, we had a very fruitful meeting with the Greek and the Cyprus competition agencies in Cairo, and maybe soon we'll be having more towards the Mediterranean kind of cooperation and collaboration, because also there is a lot of trade happening in this area, and this is very important also to enhance the competition environment, not from I would say companies and cartel and conduct cases, but also from governmental decisions that might hinder competition in these areas. So that's also from a competitive neutrality standpoint, is very important to look into decisions and decrees that might hinder competition and the enhancement of competition within our regions. So I'll stop here and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to Martina to ask a little bit from your point of view, what are the benefits of this regional cooperation for smaller jurisdictions, namely to deal with such hot topics as digitalization?
Thank you. And just to refer briefly to what I've said in the beginning about the benefits, I love hearing of both of you saying what are the benefits for you, because it's really something that I also agree on, and it's really great to hear very tangible examples of benefits you hear, and especially Dr. Memba, you've said about, you're putting this into perspective, I think, what competition law and competition cooperation is for in a wider perspective, for the economy, for consumers, and for people at large. As for us, I think our cooperation is very practically based, and it's very bottom up. So we cooperate on topics that we find problematic for us. And the few things that I found, the two things actually most relevant to your question, Teresa, for the smaller jurisdictions, in the sense that our competition authorities are not as good resourced as other competition authorities, and also we feature many small countries. So the two things are digital and agency effectiveness. Digital cooperation on digital is very important for us because it's an emerging issue where we have to find out new approaches. We are dealing with new practices and with much more elaborated practices technologically, and also we are facing economic arguments that sometimes are very difficult to either not necessarily understand, but also understand in the sense that we need more resources, we need more skills and more capacities. So international cooperation is a way of sharing experiences and approaches, getting inspiration in the situation where smaller authorities don't necessarily have the resources to get the capacities in-house, such as economists who understand those topics, or data scientists. So we exchange a lot about new tools and approaches in the sector, but we are also interested in understanding. Many of us don't yet tackle digital businesses. Many start, but we don't tackle big tech, for example. So it's interesting for us to see what is the spillover from cases in other countries, particularly in Europe. The precedents are very important for us also in our own enforcement. So we are interested in learning the spillovers from those precedents and those cases by other authorities and by the European Commission. And we are also interested in finding out how new policies like DMA are going to impact us, our markets particularly, in the sense that how the big tech will behave in our countries, that is the gatekeeper, but also trying to understand whether there is similar regulations that we could adapt on our national grounds for our own national gatekeepers. So these are interesting things. And we are actually going to have in November a workshop on this, where we will discuss things like that, which is investigations and tools, but we'll also dive into issues such as intersection with consumer protection in digital, dark patterns, behavioral aspects of consumer behavior, intersection with privacy, and also new practices such as, or new developments such as AI. And the other thing is agency effectiveness, because as I said in the beginning, we are smaller jurisdictions and we have resource problems. So we are finding it very useful to exchange on how we deal with those things, because we really share those problems. How we deal with research challenges, both financial and skill deficiencies, with sometimes even things like lack of motivation and lack of management skills of particularly senior staff. So these are the things where we find it very useful to exchange and to find out how, at no cost, we could find some solutions to those issues.
Thank you very much. I know that we are a bit over time. Sorry for that. But before we close the session, I wanted to ask if there was any comment or question from our participants. I see one request over there. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Joanna Lennart. I'm from AP Møller-Mærsk. So here I'm representing the industry here. And I have a question for Mr. Willard Mwimba. We, at the group level, dealt a couple of times with the COMESA Competition Commission, especially on...
I hope I've not been quoting some lies already.
No, absolutely not. Especially on the merger control side. And I have two questions, because from business perspective, of course, we are considering different investments, different scenarios. And the filing fees at the COMESA Competition Commission are high. Especially if you are a big international group, of course it will be always the maximum cap. And I was wondering if you are considering any revision or any, let's say, different levels of filing fees for different types of transactions. And just to put a little bit more background into my question, let's imagine a scenario that there are two very big international groups that would like to create a small joint venture in one of the COMESA member states. And of course, this would be a relatively small investment, and then the level of the filing fee could actually exceed, the business case, right? So the business case would no longer be viable. So are you considering any revision of the filing fees in that context? That's one question. And then I have another one also for you, regarding the one-stop shop, and we very much appreciate it, and we very much appreciate that now I think all COMESA member states accept the one-stop shop. There are some exceptions in the past, but I think it's the past, so we are also very happy about it. But what we see in practice is that every time the merger filing is submitted to the COMESA Competition Commission, then of course, as in the European Union, the filing is shared with the member states, but then the questions from the member states start coming to the merging parties. And I was wondering, from the procedural perspective, but practically speaking, how does it work with the COMESA receiving input from member states? Because then I imagine also the member states share some input with the COMESA Competition Commission.
Thank you. Before I ask Willard to reply, is there any other question or comment? I see another one. Oh, sorry, I missed one of them. The audience is in darkness, so to speak. Not very easy for us to see. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much, first of all, for an interesting panel and indeed some information that I hear for the first time. So I just wanted a quick question to Martina about this memorandum of understanding on cooperation with Ukraine, Moldova, and other 10 countries. 8 countries, yes. So the scope of the cooperation is more based on the facilitating information exchanges, or maybe I missed this part. Yeah, just really. Does it cover, let's say, merger control or all the pillars of competition law? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final one, Lynn, I think it's you.
We have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And I was wondering if Willard and Dr. Mumtaz would address what this means in terms of cooperation, particularly given the spaghetti bowl of relationships across Africa with the regional competition authorities and the other agreements in place.
Thank you. So Willard, over to you. Then maybe I will ask, then Martina will reply to the second question, and Mahmoud and Willard will reply to the third one. And I can also comment. If we have the time, please go ahead.
Teresa, I think you should give us a bit more time. Remember, we are 10 minutes late, if we agree.
I think we have overstepped almost our stay, but as long as nobody pushes us out.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Major filing fees. The first disclaimer is that I will not defend, my comments will not be defending the current major fees, but I'm just contextualizing. You will recall that when we started our operations, the major filing fees, the maximum was at $500,000 US in 2013, and there was so much outcry from businesses out there. And as I said, our focus is to contribute to attracting investments in the common market. So we did listen, and as you may know, sometimes these international laws may take a bit of time to amend, but I think we did it with some super speed in 1 year, 10 months, if I may say that, and reduced from 500,000 maximum to 200,000, so about 67% reduction. It was not as easy as businesses and lawyers who had complained may think, because we had to convince our member states. Remember, some of them actually, their filing fees are much higher than even at COMESA. That cost of doing business reduction from a major perspective I spoke about was basically as a result of that. If you go to Zambia, their filing fees, of course, with exchange rate issues and what, is much higher than 200,000, the maximum. If you go to Malawi, they don't even have a maximum. It depends on your turnover, and it can go as much as it can. We have about 50,000 in Zimbabwe, 50,000 in Eswatini, and different fees in different member states. So the issue was, because remember, the law is approved by those member states in those meetings. So the issue when we reduced to $200,000 was that we could not immediately go back and say, we need to reduce again, because they were questioning why we were reducing in the first place if some of our member states even had a much higher filing fee than at COMESA, and if a transaction is notified at COMESA, it means you avoid all these filing fees in those countries. But it's a good question. It is still worth considering, and the good thing is that we are reviewing the COMESA competition regulations. That is part of law. And by next year, February, we'll be exposing that to our stakeholders. Amongst them is yourself, and indeed other colleagues and lawyers who are here. Please make as much comments to that document, because once we adopt what you have, when we present it to those council meetings, and we have those justifications as not just coming from us, but from the market, it becomes easy to justify that. So it is something I can promise that we would look at, and please be on the lookout in February when we put out that document for comments. The issue of one-stop shop, indeed, we are glad that COMESA is a one-stop shop now. I think the country you mentioned there was Kenya. When we started, Kenya was not so comfortable with that, but they are very much on board now. Obviously, it was the teething problems which we got over. Now, the question you raised, that once you notify, you still receive questions from member states. I would call that, I would look at it from two sides. Number one, it is still a teething problem because once a transaction is notified, it is a commercial transaction. The member states do give in an input, yes, by giving us what they think could be the effects of that transaction in that country. Okay? But then the second part also is that for the member states to appreciate what the effects would be in their country, they need to have as much information as possible. So when they get back to the merging parties for those questions, in fact, they are not saying they are getting those questions so that they reject or approve the merger in their country. They are simply getting that information so that they feed into that regional perspective. And it's not always that whatever member states give to us, we accept it. There are a number of times when we've disagreed, but there have also been a number of times when their submissions are genuine. So just to give you comfort, those questions, when they do ask them, the transaction still remains a commercial transaction. The assessment still remains a commercial assessment. Decision would be made by COMESA. But the countries are trying to get as much information as possible to assist them give a perspective of what the effects would be at country level. And just one last thing, Teresa, that I should have said in my presentation earlier. In one of the achievements, COMESA now has an annual business and lawyers conference. Starting, I think it has happened 2 times now, so we'll be having one next year. It would be good if colleagues from here, LIA lawyers, European businesses, can be participating in those conferences, because a number of issues like that are discussed and clarified, and our member states and national competition authorities are also there. So some of these things can easily be clarified in meetings like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I turn to Martina for the second question, the scope of the MOU.
Yes, thank you very much, Hannah, because it's a very good question that I did not have time to address. Actually, we can cooperate on everything except for merger, because that's we'll have to be governed with international rules, the EU rules as well. But we can cooperate also on joint enforcement. We can do joint enforcement, joint market studies, joint antitrust investigations, and with one caveat that we are 8 ECN countries, so we have to be complementary to the ECN, and ECN takes precedence. So if we are cooperating between the ECN countries only, we are cooperating based on the ECN rules, and if we are cooperating with Ukraine or Moldova, we can, on a voluntary basis, do any joint enforcement as well. So that's left out to voluntary decision of the countries, and for cooperation between ECN, non-ECN and a non-ECN country of the memorandum. So we can do everything and not just exchange of experiences. Thanks.
Thank you. Mahmoud, I would like you to say something, please, about AFCFTA, and then I think we'll need to close. Over to you.
Sure, thank you. I like the expression of the spaghetti bowl that have been mentioned. I think it's a true fact in a way or another, but we're trying to make it a spaghetti before going into the boiled water, I would say. How is that going to be done? Basically, we're working, there is a competition protocol that have been approved and been in place. There is a very clear working right now with several people, including UNCTAD, I think, assisting us, including ACF, the African Competition Forum, including COMESA, including everybody would be concerned with that. We're working currently on the merger thresholds and how things are going to be looking like, with having the local nexus, the regional nexus, and the continental nexus. So it's going to be very clear, and we're making sure that this should be a clear process, how it's going to be done, with a clear due process, how these entities going to be involved with each other, even going as far as, is there going to be a regional competition commission that's going to look into these merger or not? So everything is being discussed to make sure that these things are going to be very clear. And I think it's clear now for me at least, there is a clear local nexus, a clear regional nexus, and going to be a clear continental nexus. So as I mentioned, it's going to be, and our aim and I'm speaking here from an Egyptian perspective, that we will not be approving something that's not going to be clear, that's going to disrupt business, but what we're going to approve is something that's easy to be done and is for the benefit of the African people, at the same time does not disrupt businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just add that this reference to the spaghetti bowl is also extremely accurate, because there are 7 regional economic organizations in the African continent that have elected competition law and policy at regional level. So of course the African Continental Free Trade Area, being a continental, extremely ambitious project, will need to not only implement the competition protocol, which UNCTAD had the privilege to assist during the negotiations and is now working also with the Secretariat of the AFCFTA. But there will be a number of overlapping, as Mahmoud said, overlapping competences, because already some overlapping already exists, mostly in Central and Western Africa. But it's also, I think, a very interesting case of how the existing regional collaboration can really contribute to further, first of all, the functioning of the widest regional economic area, and of course make the implementation of the competition protocol as effective as possible. I would like, again, to thank very much my speakers. I would like to thank you, the audience, for staying put for a bit longer than foreseen. Please join me in a round of applause, and see you later in the Lear Festival. Thank you. You're done. You're done. Thank you. Thank you.
By the way, we are going to have Comesa also at the ISPER conference.
Yes.
I was wondering, the cooperation on consumer has the same scope as the competition.
Yes. Yeah, we just
So
moved.
you're the most advanced.
Yeah, they started later, but